At first glance, it may appear desolate and barren. But as the sun drops in the sky, shadows swirl. Colors merge, and life abounds. The Santa Rosa and San Jacinto Mountains are young, with flanks that are among the steepest in North America. Witness an abundance of diversity of flora and fauna that is breathtaking in its scope and resolute in its grandeur. Located in Southern California's Coachella Valley, 100 miles east of Los Angeles and just west of the Palm Springs Desert Resorts, this mountain range is 60 miles long and 13 miles deep, encompassing over 272,000 acres. Here, the extremes of climatic conditions are so varied that in one day it's possible to go from the parched desert floor to snow-capped mountain peaks. But rapid population growth in the surrounding communities raised concerns that this natural setting could fall victim to encroaching urbanization. How then could the winds of the canyons, the whispers of the streams, and the constant chatter of the animals, birds, and insects be heard? Who would speak for them? A coalition of concerned citizens, government officials, tribal leaders, federal and state agencies, community leaders, and environmentalists all banded together in an effort to develop a cohesive plan to help preserve this important area as a national monument.
Congresswoman Bono made certain that this was going to be done the right way. There could be no doubt as to the intent of the tribe, the federal agencies involved, and the community at large.
I really wanted to write the legislation. I believe it's best that the local people and the local voices are included in that legislation, and that's how we did this monument.
We chose to work with Mary Bono, the building industry, and truly everybody got to the table and she, made us compromise. And we got a bipartisan, unanimous vote from the Senate and the Congress.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of my legislation, H.R. 3676, the Santa Rosa and San Jacinto Mountains National Monument Act. Congress has an opportunity to enact legislation which was originated.
On October 24, 2000, Public Law 106-351 was signed into existence. This mountain range would become one of the few national monuments ever created by an act of Congress rather than executive order. It would now be known as the Santa Rosa and San Jacinto Mountains National Monument, ensuring that the area's wildlife, botanical, and geological treasures would be secured for future generations.
The monument actually sets aside some truly magnificent scenic, cultural, and scientific resources in an area that is without parallel anywhere in the United States.
The entire National Monument process was about our children and taking care to pass something on to our children. And I do believe that people care a great deal about a lasting legacy for these mountains.
Everywhere you look, there's life. There's trees and flowers blooming. There's animals running all over the place.
There's so much history here. There's so much beauty here.
It's all about a quality of life.
This area has the best winter hiking in the world.
I think the canyon itself has a true healing property to it.
All different animals, different trees, and different views that are wonderful.
So it's a land of contrasts and extremes that you really can't find anywhere else.
You speak of mirage. That is one of the great beauties of the desert. Sometimes there is an Indian village to be seen at the water's edge. These things the Indian people love to see. They know that the spirits still live and show their power to the people. Chief Potencio.
The Cahuilla Indians have lived in the monument region for thousands of years.
The monument area was the center of Cahuilla universe. Every portion of the monument area was owned by the Cahuilla people. Different groups owned different pieces of the territory. And they used that territory and everything in it, from material goods to the fauna, the flora, and they managed it very well.
Actually, this plant here is probably the most important medicine plant to the Cahuilla people. It's called a creosote bush. It has many uses. It's like visiting the pharmacist right here. The power were in the leaves. It has one of the strongest antioxidants known to man. When they have a cut, a wound, they would make a poultice with the leaves and apply it to the wound. I put a warm stone over that, and it drew the infection out, and the wound will heal faster than normal. When I look at these rocks, I look at these stones, and to me, it hasn't moved. It's been these same rocks have been seen by the early Cahuilla people thousands of years ago.
We came from the water, we came from the trees, we came from the rocks, we came from the bushes. All of it formed who we are.
Knowing how the Cahuilla Indian used this area and how they survived in an incredibly harsh land, but survived in a grand way, gives tremendous impetus to the cultural sophistication of the Cahuilla people.
Walking through these canyons alone, the feeling that I have is one of humility and of respect.
When we look at the monument, we need to remember that this landscape is a landscape full of spirit and a landscape with deep meaning, meaning thousands of years old. And that for us, it's a fun place to hike. For the Cahuilla, it is a place full of memory. It's a place where their ancestors lived. It's a place still occupied by these powerful spirit beings.
You sense that you've walked there before, your family has walked there before, your family plucked from the ground the food, they drank from the stream. For millennium, we've been doing this.
And the rock you pick up may be the rock your ancestors had picked up.
Exactly.
And the Cahuilla children, how would they retain the traditions and heritage of their ancestors? As with many cultures worldwide, the answer lay in oral tradition. To the Cahuilla, these voices took shape in songs and dances known simply as bird songs.
The bird songs told of things that were happening in the sacred past.
Bird songs in general are usually sung at social gatherings, And for happy events, we sing about birthdays, weddings. But there are some sad songs in there because of the hardships they face. They tell about that. But the happiest part is when they come home, when they see Mount San Jacinto, they are coming home. That was the happiest time. And as they got up top and looked down, they were home at last.
Singing birds is something I am proud of. It's who I am. I grew up doing this.
The Cahuilla have always been stewards of the land, and the youth of today are intimately aware of the importance of continuing that tradition.
Slowly, there was development and other uses on the land. The respect of the land and the balance of the land was lost. And so the animals started disappearing, and bighorn sheep represent, in symbolism, beginning the depletion of Cahuilla people. If bighorn sheep are revitalized and they're coming back, well, so are Cahuilla people.
On top of Mary Peak, the wild mountain sheep go at lambing time. The rams keep a lookout for danger all about the whole country.
The Peninsula Range's bighorn sheep is important to this national monument because it symbolizes a very wild, free, large mammal.
That this species is in this desert and is in trouble, and partly due because of loss of habitat that has been inflicted on them through the development and growth of this community.
The bighorn sheep are our largest endangered animal in this area. And you can only find them from this mountain range, the San Jacintos, through the Santa Rosas, and down into Baja. So we're very blessed to have them in our midst. They've been a part of this area for tens of thousands of years.
There's around 400 or 500 right now, and so it's the subspecies of desert sheep that is endangered, and they were once listed almost 1,200 and dropped down to 280. We've had 101 sheep now released into the wild. We've had great success with them, and it's been an important step in actually recovering some of these small deems or small peninsular sheep populations.
The water came standing high, with great waves rolling over and over as it came. With the water came fish. The Indians began to make traps to catch fish. They made the traps in the rocks.
This is one of the most unusual archaeological sites in the Coachella Valley, quite unique in North America. These fish traps were first constructed about 1,000 years ago, and the last one was built about 500 years from today. And they basically were just circular depressions built along the shoreline. Fish would come in. Cahuilla Indians would throw a net across the front, trapping the fish inside, and then they would have access to this magnificent source of protein and food. Although this area is a desert today and is about as arid a land as you could possibly imagine, 500 years ago there was an ancient lake here called Lake Cahuilla, and the highest point that that lake ever reached was right up there on the ancient shoreline, which is 42 feet above sea level today. And that made for a lake that was over 300 feet in depth, because all of this land is below sea level.
12 million years ago, the Gulf of California extended up into what is now known as the Coachella Valley. The Colorado River intersected the Gulf near present-day Yuma, Arizona. The water of the Colorado slowed as it entered the Gulf. It carried mud and sand born of the river's torrential flow that cut the Grand Canyon. And over the course of several million years, it deposited the silt and sediment into the Gulf, creating a massive delta. Once the deltaic berm was established, it cut off flow from the Colorado River to the northern Salton Basin, effectively leaving the inland sea to dry out in the arid desert climate. Over time, sediment material built up, diverting the river from its original course and filling the Salton Basin to the north, creating ancient Lake Cahuilla.
the ancient water lines, the highest stands, are evidenced by a very clear shoreline deposit of the travertine right on the rocks above my head here and across the valley on the slopes of the Martinez Mountains.
Sediment deposits and flooding continued and caused the river to change course again, directing the flow back to the Gulf, and ancient Lake Cahuilla began to evaporate. This cycle would repeat itself again and again. Today, we have evidence of the lake's size and influence by the fossil oyster beds and marine deposits found throughout the Salton Basin.
I'm finding bits of clamshell, and these are regular gastropod snail shells, evidence of the shallow water that covered this part of the Lake Cahuilla shoreline, supporting abundant marine life that the Native American population would utilize from their village sites almost a mile away at this point. Ancient Lake Cahuilla covered an area of over 1,000 square miles, more than 3 times the size of the present-day Salton Sea and more than 6 times the size of Lake Tahoe.
400 years ago, in the 1600s, Lake Cahuilla experienced its last highest stand of 42 feet above sea level. If the cities of Indio and La Quinta had existed then, they would be underwater, and the northernmost shore of the lake would have bordered the city of Indian Wells. While the main body of ancient Lake Cahuilla was not located within the National Monument boundaries, its northwestern shoreline left the watermarks we find visible today.
I can imagine the Cahuilla Indians must have had swimming contests to swim from the coastal village sites over here all the way out to Travertine Point and back.
The Indian villagers would have seen Travertine Point as an island rising out of ancient Lake Cahuilla. Generations of Cahuilla Indians would have witnessed the mysterious phenomenon of the lake rising and falling and eventually disappearing into the desert. In the early 1900s, Lake Cahuilla was in a dry cycle. Irrigation canals were built to help support the agriculture in the region. In 1905, an El Niño year, the Colorado River flooded and burst through the diversion dams and flowed into the Salton Basin. It took 2 years for the irrigation company to fill the breach by dumping boxcars of sand where the water was flooding in. In that time, it had filled the bottom of the Salton Basin, creating an area now known as the Salton Sea. Since 1907, the Salton Sea has gone down 10 feet due to evaporation, but it still covers an area of 300 square miles. By 1936, the Hoover Dam was completed and now prevents the large flow of sediment required to divert the Colorado River.
The lake doesn't flood today because we've tamed the Colorado River, its source. And until the Hoover and other major dams along the Colorado River might someday fill in with silt and sediment themselves, the Lake Cahuilla will not happen again.
Almost a century ago, noted author and naturalist J. Smeaton Chase hiked the trails that rambled through the area, creating memories that would be forever immortalized in his book, California Desert Trails. He camped in this wilderness for months on end, at a time when these mountains were isolated in their natural and rugged state, making his observations an important rendering of the grandeur, eloquence, and uniqueness of this land.
Essentially, the desert is nature in her simplest expression.
I think what's probably most interesting and what most people find delightful about the desert is it appears to be a very barren landscape. And you venture into one of the canyons, you walk up along the slopes, and during the spring find wildflowers. There's just a tremendous discovery in this barren landscape of the life that's able to persist in this extreme environment. One example is the ocotillo, which grows on the slopes. It's a plant that only puts out leaves after rain or during a very wet year. It might look much of the time like it's not alive, and after a rainfall it will all of a sudden sprout an array of beautiful green leaves.
The smoke tree is common at the foot of the monument. It has uniquely adapted to the desert with reduced leaves that look like spines and a grayish-green color that assists with water efficiency. In spring and early summer, the tree becomes a tremendous display of deep purple flowers.
Desert mallow is a plant that most people would find as they walk a trail in the monument. It has a beautiful flower like a hibiscus, and it is interesting in that the flower color can vary quite a lot. You can find lavender flowers, you can find rich grenadine flowers. The scientific name actually alludes to this variety in the flower color. So it's a really wonderful shrub to get to know.
Brittlebush, also known as Insilia, is a member of the sunflower family and covers the slopes of the Santa Rosa Mountains. In springtime, it comes alive with bright yellow daisy flowers. Early missionaries would burn the gummy sap of the bush as incense and called the plant incensio.
It's a tremendous treat to encounter the hedgehog cactus in the National Monument. It's a clump of very scary-looking spines. It's a plant that's well adapted to not only holding water in its fleshy stems, but also keeping from being eaten, and that's what all the spines are for. But in the springtime, it blossoms with these tremendous, brilliant colored flowers, and the cactus flower is just one of the most beautiful flowers in the desert. One of the very interesting things about the monument is the life zones that you have the opportunity to pass through. It's sometimes referred to as a palms to pines transition, and we go from, at the lowest elevations, a desert environment, all the way up to high peaks at San Jacinto and Santa Rosa Mountains in an alpine zone. So there's a tremendous diversity of animals and plants that are associated with that, and you can experience everything from the hottest desert and one of the most extreme habitats in the world to, at the very high elevations, pine forests and snow and an entirely different climate and natural environment in terms of the biology and the wildlife.
We're standing right here in the middle of a subalpine forest, or a mixed coniferous forest we call it, and we're surrounded primarily by pine trees and also fir trees as well. We're looking at Mount San Jacinto, the peak itself, and it's at 10,834 feet. You can see the ridgeline runs to the south toward Jeans Peak, which is also over 10,000 feet. And that ridgeline serves as the westernmost boundary of the National Monument. This park and this whole monument is very significant because there just isn't that many high elevation alpine areas left in Southern California. And it's very important that we preserve those areas. It gives people a chance to come up into a wilderness experience and enjoy some of the solitude, the quiet, the fresh air, the scenes, the vistas, the views that they can have.
Whatever form of geological action may explain the peculiarities of these mountain shapes, it has resulted in a great irregularity of surface. In a mile or less of mountainside, I could count 10 or a dozen main canyons.
We found that there are some very important geological resources that I think were important for the purpose of preservation of this land that's within the monument. Other features such as these huge canyons that emanate out from the mountains. You only see these palm oases within these canyons and nowhere else, and they're there because of the geology. The very steep escarpments, the sides of the mountains that you see here are, again, very unique to this area and very important part of this valley. Such things as this famous Martinez Mountain landslide, which is one very unique feature.
The Martinez Mountain rock slide, I believe, is one of the most important items within the National Monument. It is the largest rock slide within the monument. It is the second largest such feature in North America, and it's considered to be about the 5th largest in the world. And the top of the mountain is actually granitic. It's made up of like diorites. And the diorite has been brought in a sort of a flat fault. And so at the bottom of it had a weak spot. And that weak spot, as you can see a flat area, that weak spot the rock was shattered, and when the rock got full of water, probably in the Pleistocene or Ice Age, some 15 to 20,000 years ago, then we had an earthquake either on the San Andreas Fault behind us or on the San Jacinto Fault on the backside of the mountain, and that earthquake broke that stuff loose and triggered it, and it just came down, and you can see where it came down and then turned and came out towards us. It actually made a turn at the bottom of the hill. And this material was at one time all sitting in that little groove up at the top. From here we can see the toe of the slide. The slide itself is some 250 feet above the old surface. And we can also see the actual front of the toe and the boulders that roll down off of it afterwards and are now laying out in front. Here we have a couple of the larger boulders that came down through the rock slide, and it's interesting, they're out in front of the rock slide. They have tumbled off the toe of the rock slide since the slide stopped. These are much larger than the average. The average is probably more like the ones you see right in here. Notice the patina on the rocks. Where it's been knocked off, it's got a rusty color, and on the surface you can see the patina. You may be able to see some of the shininess as you move it around with the sun glinting off of it. Yet on the side of the rock, you'll see the actual original rock right here, this gray color, made up of these white plagioclase feldspars and this black hornblende and biotite mica. And around the corner of this one, you'll see an overhang underneath it. The overhangs of this type were used by the Cahuilla for shelter. The other thing you can do with one of these is you can run poles down from the side and brush the side so that you can use this as an area to get in out of the wind. They use some of the larger rocks along the bottom for bedrock grinding features. And because of the nice flatness, it is believed that they also used the surface of the old slide as a trail or series of trails to get from the valley floor up to the mountains.
The trails of the Indians were everywhere. They led up all the canyons. They were hunting trails for the men and used by the women to gather the seeds, nuts, plums, and acorns. So many things. They led from the land of one tribe to another. All the Indians did their part to keep the trails clear. The trails were sacred to the Indians.
It's got an incredible trail system. The vistas, the variety. There are many places where you can go from desert to alpine in a day. And the palm oases are truly incredible.
The Desert Riders is a group that started in 1930. We're the oldest group here in town, and we have built over 250 miles of trails, most of them on the old Indian trails. They were here 1,000 years ago.
There's a part of the trail down in Palm Canyon where the hard granite is worn down 18 inches or so from people walking over them. And the Cahuillas say that those trails have been there since time immemorial.
The key part of it is access, because so many areas in the West are preserved, but they've eliminated the access for humans, and that's really a tragedy. The nice thing about the monument is that it's preserving not only the flora and the fauna and the environment, but it's also preserving access for horses and hikers and people to enjoy it.
It gives you a peace of mind. The sun on your back, maybe the wildflowers are blooming and give off a lovely aroma. Whatever it is, and there are a lot of things to feel that you might not even see, but they kind of soak in.
And so to be able to find solitude with a couple of twists and turns up a canyon trail, and yet know that you're within this giant mass of people nearby, is a remarkable thing. It's remarkable for human beings, and I think it's remarkable in terms of the nature of the plant and animal communities that are also there. When you think about the monument literally coming right up against the communities of the Coachella Valley, you see some interesting issues. I think in the past, for most of the valley communities, the monument was a visual backdrop, a stage setting against which we did our building and our restaurants and our golf courses and all the rest of that. Increasingly, it is not just a prop, it is now a place of significant interest and value to those communities.
But I believe it's better for the well-being of all humankind that they have spaces like this National Monument to get out in and to experience nature, and whether it's to help you forget about the woes of a long day or to get out and teach your children about the environment. I think it's so important that we've done this at this point in Southern California's future.
Well, I think we're very lucky. This mountain, when you come from any other direction in this world, you see this mountain, and that is home. You know it's here, you know the air, the sounds, the beauty, the sparseness sometimes to other people, but it's very much home.
I feel that our family is a part of the National Monument. I feel like our ancestry for me, it's almost a spiritual experience out there that I wish other people could feel.
We love the land. It's part of us. We just love it, yeah.
While very few people actually live within the monument, most visitors and residents enter through 5 main portals: the Palm Springs Aerial Tramway, the Indian Canyons, the Santa Rosa and San Jacinto Mountains National Monument Visitor Center, Highway 74, and the Living Desert.
The Living Desert is a window to the larger monument. We're at the base of it, part of us is in the monument, and I think one of our roles, now that there is a monument, is to help people learn about desert, learn about what they might see, so that when they leave here and go into the monument proper and experience it for themselves, that they've had a bit of a window, a bit of an education before they get out there.
The monument encompasses so many life zones that the plant and animal diversity here is tremendous, with hundreds and even thousands of species found in a fairly small area. In most areas of the country, you wouldn't see that kind of diversity, but here in the monument you do, and that's one of the things that makes it such a spectacular region.
The Palm Springs Aerial Tramway is the northernmost gateway to the monument. During the journey in the world's largest rotating tram car, visitors experience a 360-degree view of the rugged Chino Canyon and Coachella Valley. The tram ascends 2.5 miles from the desert floor through all of the monument's life zones. Spectacular views and vistas of the monument and valley can be seen from the observation decks at the mountain station.
One of the beautiful parts about Mount San Jacinto is the ease of access to the park. You can hop onto the Palm Springs Aerial Tramway down on the desert floor and be up here at 10,000 feet in a matter of 8 minutes. Truly, this is one of the most unique environments in Southern California. You get a chance to experience much of the environment that you'd find in Sierra Nevada within a 2-hour drive of 20 million people in Southern California.
Less than 10 minutes south of the tram's magnificent ascent through Chino Canyon are the Indian Canyon entrances to the monument. Taquish Canyon is the first of 2 at the foot of Mount San Jacinto, just west of downtown Palm Springs. Further south, Palm Canyon has the largest stand of indigenous Washingtonia foliifera, the California fan palm. The abundant hiking and walking trails in the Indian Canyons allow visitors to explore the steep rocky landscape and its ancient mysteries. Tumbling waterfalls of snow-capped ice melt, streams emerging from inner mountain reservoirs, and pools lazing in the warm, sun-drenched light.
I could share everything you have about these canyons to other people. It's a wonderful feeling to teach someone, to have them bring something back home with them other than a postcard or a souvenir, but a mental picture and a mental note of what they're going to have and what other people can go see later on in life.
15 miles south of the Indian Canyons, travelers can discover the diversity of picturesque views along scenic Palms to Pines, State Highway 74. With its serpentine switchbacks, it has become famous among the nation's drives as it meanders through the center of the Santa Rosa Mountains. Breathtaking overlooks, dramatic elevation changes guarantee an unforgettable drive. Unveiling the serene and changing landscape of the National Monument. At the base of the Santa Rosa Mountains on Highway 74 is the Santa Rosa and San Jacinto Mountains National Monument Visitor Center.
For folks coming to the National Monument, I would hope that they would leave with a sense of what a special place this is, the cultural significance to the Cahuilla people, the unique wildlife, the Peninsula Range's bighorn sheep, and that folks can still find in Southern California a place for solitude.
This monument deliberately is set aside as a place of personal discovery. And so don't expect to have everything mapped out, don't expect to have everything signed out. Expect to find things on your own and be amazed by the marvel of it. Remember that the desert is the most delicate, the most easily to damage, the most difficult to repair of all of the natural landscapes in the United States.
There's the temporary steward of the land, and that's the truth. We're only stewards of all of these lands, and I believe that's part of what the National Monument does. It gives us that temporary stewardship that gives us something to pass on to future generations.
The Voices of the Monument will now include generations of visitors who will explore these protected lands. They will speak of the monument's vast beauty, share adventures and stories of discovery, and take away a profound sense of nature's magnificent gifts. Thanks to a coalition of interested people bound together by a common goal, the plants, animals, and natural beauty contained in the monument will be protected and poised to flourish, ready to be enjoyed by future generations. Now, we may all speak for the rocks and trees.